But Jesus said, but then he said, but what? Right, but what? How often do we find ourselves going, okay, God, but what do you think about that? But we begin or continue today, but today we particularly begin what they call Luke's journey. And so the longest part in this gospel has the most stories in this part of the walk, the most information about Jesus' life as he walks towards Jerusalem, which is what we hear about in the gospel today. We hear about it right after Holy Week. And Jesus, the beginning of this gospel, it says when he knew it was about to ascend. So this is the time in the gospel. We're in ordinary time, the Episcopal Church is why we've got green. And this is the kind of time when we really get to know and understand. We get to hear words and stories about Jesus. We get to hear particular messages. We heard wonderful words from Paul today about how it is we're supposed to live and move in the world. How we're supposed to love and care for each other. How we're supposed to help each other and be there for each other. How we're supposed to find ways for thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But wait, God, I like it this way. But wait, God, I have more power if it's this way. Wait, God, I'd rather do it this way. But we're called to love the other. We're called to love and care and be there for the other, for our lives. For our lives. Not just upon, conception or at the beginning, but for our whole lives. How is it that we care for each and every one of us that takes a breath? How is it that we can really value life? That's what we're called to do as Christians. And sometimes I'm one of those people in the world that has all kinds of labels, right? People could give me all kinds of labels. Well, I'm a woman, that's a challenge. And then I certainly grew up and found out I have ADHD, which wouldn't surprise anyone that knows me. Where's the squirrel? I have addiction. I am recovering from that. I have all kinds of labels. I'm Episcopalian. There's a label, right? Dial a label. But one of the labels that I really worry about is when people say, "Oh, you're a Christian." Because I am a Christian. I believe in God like nobody's business. Like I can't even express to you why or how I believe in God, but it's in my bones. I believe in Jesus, and each day that goes by that I pray with and come to know Jesus, I know Jesus and believe in Jesus more every single day. When I first started this path, I was in this process where they were evaluating me if I should be a priest, and I was so sure it was going to work out great because they were going to finally find out that I shouldn't be one. And so this guy is sitting, we're in this whole circle, where 18 people, they get to ask me all these questions, and this guy pulled his glasses down on the end of his nose. And he looked at me and he said, "So, what's your relationship like with Jesus?" And in my head, I'm thinking, sweet, this is going to be my ticket out of here. And I prayed and I said, "You know what? We're really new friends. I expect it's probably going to take the rest of my life to get to know him better." 20 some odd years later, I can tell you that today we're still, I wouldn't say we're new friends anymore, but I think we're really doing pretty well. And when I hear what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to live my day as imperfectly as we do it, it's to the best of my ability to try and love and care for those in our midst, and to the best of my ability to do that for myself. I don't hear I get to build a box around me. I don't hear I get to pretend you don't count. I don't hear I don't like you, so I'm going to stay over here. I hear love each other as you want to be loved. Care for each other. I hear stories, which we'll hear next week, about the Samaritan woman that nobody would talk to, or the Samaritan person no one would talk to. Or the hemorrhaging woman down the road where we hear no one would even touch her, but Jesus did. Jesus saw her. Jesus saw her. She was a woman, so he shouldn't have seen her or talked to her. She was bleeding and had been for 12 years, so no one would talk to her. But Jesus did. Jesus did. That's what we're called to do. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We're not in heaven right now, and that is ultimately very good news. In that, I am one that most of the time I'm really glad I'm not up there, or down there, or in here, or wherever we know it is. But right now we are on earth. And so there's some things that for some of us are hard. Whether it's a Christian that decides they get to decide what the Bible says. They get to decide what Jesus says. Because, we all get to have an opinion. Isn't that the great thing? That's one of the things I love about living in America. That I get to have an opinion. And so do you. What a blessing. But we're living in a time right now where, at least for people like me, it is feeling like it's getting more and more dangerous. Because it's harder and harder to trust that people really value our way of being. But the good news is that as Christians, we believe, as at least this Christian, let me say that, this little Christian, this little bump on the road says, that the way that we can walk through this time of having others decide what care and compassion looks like. What I believe is that God gives each one of us agency. That we get to be worried and all the things that some of us are. But we also get to remember the grace. We get to remember that God has walked this walk. In the very gospel this morning, the Samaritans and the Jews were divided. So obviously, this is not a new dynamic. The Samaritans didn't want Jesus' guys there at all. They were like, we're good. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to know anything about it. And so, but let us go kill them, his disciples said. Let us go get rid of them. Let's go be really mad at them. What does Jesus say? Jesus says, no, that's not helpful. No. Let's just go on. Maybe the town down the road will hear our message. No, we don't hurt just because we don't agree. No, we do not do that in the name of God. But okay, they don't want us there. Okay, we can't control that. But we can continue down the road and do what we can. We can bring the gospel in ways that we can, even when it feels dark. Because in an individual person's life, it might not be dark that day. In an individual person's life, it might not be dark that day. And I got to see some opportunities of that this week on Tuesday night, I believe it was. At Christ Church in Portsmouth, we celebrated the life of Reverend Jennifer Steeple, who was a deacon in the Episcopal Church, long-time ties to St. Thomas. She and her husband, Robert, had been ministers, priests, in charge of St. Christ Church in Portsmouth for a very long time. We saw people from the past. We saw people from the present. We saw people from the future. We saw people that were involved in all different parts of ministry. My favorite line of the night was T.J. Ballou, who is a friend and colleague that works in Durham. And she said she described Jennifer as an introvert with a lion's soul. There was blessings that night, even amid some of the grief. I heard the story of a woman in our congregation who had taken a class. She'd taken a class, and by the time the class was supposed to end, the project wasn't done. And this teacher stayed until a couple of them finished their project. But that's not the grace-filled part of the story. The grace-filled part of the story is this person decided that they were going to get a card, and she went, and the next day she gave that teacher a card that just said, "Thank you so much for staying longer. Thank you. We wouldn't have finished. But most importantly, thank you for being you." Grace-filled stories. Just a random act of kindness. If we don't notice, observe, and live into random act of kindness, people like me right now are going to break. But random acts of kindness with God's grace are everywhere. And we must notice them. Because God's grace is with us, even when there are forces in our world that feel very hard. Yesterday afternoon, Claire Gleason was a member of our altar guild. Nancy wanted to celebrate her life with some of the people where they live that hadn't been able to come to her service. We had people from here that baked and tended. But you know what they did more than anything? They listened to Nancy over and over again because she's a little confused. Because she's really sad. They listened to her. They answered her phone calls. They made sure that they had cookies and punch. But you know what? They made sure that Nancy, who could not do it for herself, got to have a gathering where people got to remember her beloved Claire. And when she got hot, they walked her into her home, and they picked up afterwards. That is the stuff we have to remember right now. That's the stuff I have to remember right now, because that is thy kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. We cannot control the whole earth. I have tried. Having been in relationship with a few of you, I know some of you have also tried. We can't. And if anything in the last couple of years has taught us we can't, even those of us that thought we had an edge. But we can be there and be in community and love and care for each other in our daily lives and work. We can remind each other that God is with us under the trees at Langdon Place with some Irish music playing in the back. And Claire being so psyched she didn't have to be at that. We must care for each other. We must try to learn from each other and hear each other when we can do, that sometimes bumper stickers are so ridiculous because they get lost, right? The random act of kindness. Imagine how that teacher felt when they got that card saying, "Thanks for staying late." She didn't have to do that. She'd already thanked her. We are living in a time right now where if we don't do as Jesus said, if we must not let our rage overwhelm us. We can let our anger motivate us. We can be agents of change in whatever way you feel called to. I'm not going to tell you what that is, but you can be the agent. Anger can be energizing. Somebody taught me years ago that rage is destructive and usually really old. But anger can be energizing. What do you want to do with it? But we can't and we are not called, and Jesus tells us today in the gospel, we are not called to abuse or burn down somebody's neighborhood because they don't think like us. We are called to be the love incarnate in the world that Jesus was. That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to do. This is a Franciscan benediction that's been all around the internet at different times, but I leave us today with these thoughts. May God bless you with discomfort, at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with tears, to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. May God bless you with enough foolishness, I got enough evidence of that, to believe that you can make a difference in the world, because you can. So that you can do what others claim cannot be done. To bring justice and kindness to all our children and the poor. Amen.